Good afternoon, everyone. It's 4 o'clock. Welcome to the Planning Committee of Tuesday, November the 2nd. The minutes of October 20th, 2021 are here, and for committee, it is the corrected minutes that are on table.
Yep.
Were there any other errors or omissions?
Move adoption.
Moved and seconded. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is carried. Thank you. Were there any additions to the agenda?
Nope.
Not seeing any. The next committee meeting is set for November 17th at 4 p.m. in council chambers. Item number 1, application by Tomas Ashtony for a zoning text amendment at 2351 Simpson Road. And for committee, it's my understanding that Mr. Ashtony is here and available for questions. Mr. Rockerby.
Hi everyone.
Mr. Rockerby?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. So nothing to add to the staff report, but I would like to just highlight some of the key aspects as this is somewhat of an odd application. So caretaker units, such as the one being applied for, are permitted in industrial zones, except for those areas that experience high levels of aircraft noise, such as the subject site. This caretaker unit is being sought to address issues of site safety, and staff have consulted with YVR on this proposal, and that correspondence is attached to the staff report. As part of the building permit, the applicant will be required to provide an acoustic report detailing how interior noise will be regulated to achieve the CMHC requirements for residential occupancies. Any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. I'll open it up to committee for questions. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you to the chair, to staff. I believe this would be a question for staff, or two questions to staff, but perhaps thank you for the delegate for being there. You might be able to add to it. The first question I have relates to the phrase existing municipal utilities. So could staff just outline what are the existing municipal utilities that a site like this provides? And I ask because I'm aware of many other non-conforming residential uses of industrial sites, and I've visited a few, and I'm just curious, what does the city consider to be the existing municipal utilities to a site like this?
For sure. Through Councillor Wolf, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the existing municipal utilities, that refers to the typical servicing connections, so the water utility, stormwater drainage, and the sanitary service connection to the site. Engineering determines that the size of those connections and the pipes that currently service the building do not need to be enlarged to provide a level of service to the one new dwelling on the property.
Thank you. Then through the chair, the staff follow up on that one. Last evening, we spoke about the 4 major utilities in the finance meeting. So obviously industrial sites pay a certain amount to that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. A little bit of a slight concern about that is many of these sites typically just have the large bins, but they don't have small pickups. So when it comes to solid waste and recycling, are all of the typical services still picked up? Like do we pick up green waste, garbage, recycling, and separated glass from sites like these?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, garbage collection would be part of the industrial collection, so it would not be done by the city. It would be by the industrial owners contract with waste collection.
Great, thank you. Yeah, just to follow up, I appreciate that. That's where you typically see the 2 large bins, or sometimes 3. So you get the really large garbage bins, and then a contractor to do the cardboard recycling. But I'm aware that we don't typically have the services provided for all the other recycling components. So I'm not sure if there's an education campaign of where people can save and then store on site and then take to the Richmond Works Yard, recycling depot, and other facilities. But I'm sure that staff provide that information to sites like this when they're going to conform to the recycling content. Thank you. Through the chair, one final question area. On page 14, it lists that there's 5 more industrial units coming, but in the report I didn't see where that's coming from. So in the development application data sheet, it goes from the bylaw requirement for a space like this is 19, and they're proposing 24. So is there any additional industrial sites, or is this strictly today the residential spaces?
Mr. Rocker?
Go ahead, George. Through the chair to Councillor Wolf. So the 19 spaces required for industrial occupancies, that refers to the total of all industrial uses on the property. So there is more than one industrial unit and more than one business on the property. The separate requirement for the new residential caretaker suite, that is 2 parking spaces. So they are providing more parking than required under our bylaws.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's what I was questioning. And then just a follow up to the comment that was shared during your the staff outline here today. They mentioned that site safety was listed as the reason for this coming forward. Could you be a little bit more detailed about that? Is it simply the noise safety issue? And I bring this up because, again, I know other non-conforming user sites, and I'm not sure what would push them to seek this type of application. So if you could be a bit more clear on what brought this forward and what might bring others forward. Thanks.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wolf, the application package that was received by staff indicated that there were some issues of theft from the property. For details about the exact motivations, that's perhaps a question best addressed to the applicant.
Then, if possible, through the chair, could the applicant speak to that either now or later if there's other questions first? I see there's another committee, or there's a committee member with a question, so perhaps it could come later.
Wolf. Councillor Day, and we'll go to the applicant after that. Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just had a question of staff. I understand that this caretaker unit is required due to the vandalism and theft. How do we know that this unit will not be just rented out to a random residential person?
This is solely for the owner's use.
Hang on just a minute. Hang on just a minute. Staff, did you want to answer this question? Or do you want the applicant to answer?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Day, the applicant has indicated that the unit is to be occupied by the owner of the strata unit, so the individual who is running the business in that strata unit. In the future, if the owner were to sell the unit or to move out of the residential caretaker suite, it could be leased out. The understanding in the zoning bylaw is that the unit would only be occupied by the owner of the business or by someone providing their security services to the business.
So is there then going to be a covenant on the property with those specifications?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the definition of a residential security operator unit includes those specifications. So the city's zoning bylaw ensures that the occupier of the unit is either the owner or an employee of the business.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I'll definitely be supporting this because I think security is important in the industrial and commercial area. So thank you very much for that.
Any other questions from committee?
Move the recommendation.
I'm going to go to the applicant right now.
No
Thank
problem.
you. Hi, Mr. Ashtony. I'm going to let you answer the questions now on regarding security, the issues that you faced that's led you to this application. Thanks for being here today.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Yes, it was a concern about the business owners who live or operate in the same building. That caretaker units would add to the security and the value of the whole property.
So had there been thefts from the property then?
I believe not to this property, but car theft and other things happening in the area.
In the area. All right, thank you. Any questions of the applicant?
Move the recommendation.
The recommendation has been moved by Councillor McNulty. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Liu. Thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Day? Councillor Day, did you oh, okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It is carried with Councillor Day in the opposition. Is that correct?
So I support the motion.
All right, there must be a bit of a delay then. All right, so it was carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 2, existing non-conforming 2-unit housing duplexes zoning compliance options. Mr. Craig and Ms. Badgell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. The information report before you today provides information responding to a referral received from General Purposes Committee in October of 2020 that directed staff to investigate how to make non-conforming 2-unit dwellings, commonly understood as duplexes, compliant where they exist and report back. Staff is reporting back. Some brief highlights are that there are currently 188 properties throughout the city that contain existing non-conforming duplexes, which are duplexes that were constructed legally but do not comply with current zoning. The existing non-conforming status of these buildings allows the continued use of the duplexes. The only significant limitation is a property owner's ability to redevelop the property with a new duplex should they wish. 16 of the properties have been rezoned or are currently subject to a rezoning application. The report identifies 3 potential options for addressing the remaining 172 properties containing existing non-conforming duplexes. The first option is the city-initiated rezoning process for the 172 properties to accommodate 2-unit housing. This option is not recommended, as identified in the staff report, as a number of the properties are designated for alternate uses in the OCP. The second option is the city-initiated rezoning process for 122 selected properties, selected to comply with the overall vision of the OCP, although I do note that 29 of these properties are identified in sub-area plans for exclusively single-family development, which would need to be reviewed further. The third option is to maintain the status quo of considering individual properties through the review of owner-initiated rezoning applications. The report also identifies financial resources that would be needed to follow the typical rezoning application processes of title searches, consultation letters, and public hearing notice mailing. These costs would normally be covered by rezoning application fees. Should Planning Committee wish to ask Council to direct staff to proceed under Option 2 to rezone the selected properties, suggested wording is included in the conclusion section of the report on page PLN 31. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I do have a question. So on PLN 27, at the top of the page, the first paragraph, it talks about how there is some protection from under the Provincial Local Government Act for the homeowner. Could you speak a bit about that?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Under the Provincial Local Government Act, a building that was constructed lawfully, such as the existing non-conforming duplexes, prior to changes in a rezoning bylaw that that remove the permitted use is considered to be a legal non-conforming use. It is provided limited protection. It is legally permitted to continue with the use that was legal at the time the building was constructed. The major limitation is that in the event that more than 75% of the value of the building above the foundation is damaged or destroyed, redevelopment would be required to comply with current zoning. This would also apply should an owner wish to tear down an older duplex and rebuild a new duplex on their property. They would not be able to do so unless the property was rezoned.
All right, thank you. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for this. So if I recall correctly, back in the 80s, the council looked at duplexes and they thought that they were bringing down the value of the neighborhood, basically. So they said, okay, no more duplexes. And so if you had a duplex, you were encouraged then to subdivide the duplex and create 2 homes. And now when you subdivide, you're encouraged to put 2 homes and have a suite in each of those homes. So my question would be, if we were to approve this, so what happens if you've been living in your duplex and you decide it's getting old and worn out and pipes are breaking, whatever, and it's time to rebuild it, you're now allowed to rebuild the duplex. Is that correct? If we go through with this recommended change, is that correct?
So just to be clear, the recommendation is in the package is to receive for information.
Oh, sorry.
If we wanted to do
Option
any...
2, if we choose option 2, which is the recommended approach. So if we decide to do something and the something is option 2, does that mean the person can then rebuild a new duplex to whatever size specification makes sense on the property?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, should council direct staff to move forward with option 2, staff would be coming back at a future date with rezoning staff reports. So there would be a few more steps involved. Council would then need to review, consider, and approve rezoning of the properties.
Okay, so if we were to consider this, then it gives us the option to determine what that new building on the site could look like, and that may or may not include, it could still be a duplex, and within the duplex there could be suites in the duplex, if that's where we go with that. Is that what I understand? Like, it gives us some options and flexibility here.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, if council opted to pursue rezoning of the 170 or the 122 properties, yes, they would have the ability to rebuild a duplex should they wish.
Okay, but the way it sits now is unless we change it somehow, they couldn't also have a suite in each half of the duplex.
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, in terms of adding suites to an existing legal non-conforming duplex, that is correct. You would not be able to do so without rezoning the property first. I believe that is the nature of your question.
Yeah, well, like if you tore the place down, you replaced it under this proposed option 2, would you be allowed to build another duplex with each side having a suite in it? Or is that something that we have to ask, like, that involves its own rezoning?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, yes, they would be allowed to build suites. Council amended the duplex zone a number of years ago to allow secondary suites in duplexes.
Okay, and then my second question is, what problem does this actually solve if we do the rezoning in option 2?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, we, from a staff perspective, we do not believe there is a significant impetus for pursuing rezoning of these properties. When the properties were rezoned in the 1980s to remove the duplex use, all of the property owners were given the ability to rezone their property free of charge at that time. These properties did not elect to do so at that time. They can continue to have a duplex, live in the home, upkeep the home as they see fit. The only impediment is the ability to rebuild a new duplex should they wish. And we do see the odd site-specific rezoning application, which does come forward to council for that exact intent.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Day.
Madam Chair. So the staff recommendation is we just accept this for information. And that does not in any way stop an owner from coming forward and requesting.
You cut out there a bit, so I think we can't hear you, Councillor Day.
I'll try going a lot closer. If someone wants to have duplex zoning to be maintained, can they still, if we just accept the recommendation today, which is received for information, can they come back at a later date and ask for that?
Yes.
Through the chair to Councillor Day, yes.
So really, nothing changes. People can still do it. Okay, perfect. And what about the 50 that are not included in the 122? Can they also apply for duplex zoning?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, those 50 would need to be looked at on an individual case-by-case basis. In some instances, those properties are identified as park acquisitions. In some cases, they're identified as transitioning to industrial uses or commercial uses. One of the key considerations for any rezoning is it must be consistent with the city's official community plan. So if somebody was to come forward to propose a rezoning of the existing duplex in an area that is designated for industrial use, we would not be able to consider such a rezone.
Thank you.
Councillor Wolf?
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, just a two quick part question here, I guess. One is, I know that this is being received for information, but what incentives do we have to provide homeowners of duplexes so that they actually retain them and refurbish them instead of demolishing them and rebuilding a new one to keep the existing materials? I'm aware of a few individuals who bought duplexes recently, and they're old from the 80s, and there's 4 units within the whole duplex. And so I'm just curious, because many of them are finding that it's worth keeping it, so there's not a lot of incentives for them. But so some of these are out of Richmond, but do Richmond specific, do we provide incentives at all for or what's available? So it doesn't have to be a Richmond specific incentive. It could be, do we encourage them to utilize provincial or federal incentives? And then the other part to that is for what was just spoken about, the 50 some odd ones that don't comply. Again, if they are sure for park acquisition as potential or as they're laid out in the OCP to be continuous uses for that as residential in that regard, what do we again, what do we provide for helping the longevity of these sites? Like, do we inform people if their site is to be a different type of zoning in the future, so to make it hard for them to keep utilizing it? And then the other part to this question, and this might not be related, but I recall, I think about a year ago, we had a duplex that burned down. I think it was in Burkeville, and they wanted to rebuild, but because it didn't comply, they weren't able to do it. Does that relate to anything in this report? Thanks.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I'll try and tackle those in sequence. In terms of incentives for retaining existing structures versus rebuilding a new structure, there are no specific incentives. The primary incentive would be if you are renovating an existing building, you typically will not need to update the city utility utility connections, i.e. the sanitary connection to the site, the water connection to the site, or the drainage connection to the site. If you were to rebuild a new structure, those connections would all need to be reviewed and likely upgraded to current city standard. If you were to rebuild as well, you may have to upgrade the site frontage with curb, gutter, sidewalk, depending on the location, whether such infrastructure exists. So in terms of retention versus rebuild, the primary incentive is the city utility costs and potential off-site improvements associated with a building permit. In terms of the OCP designations on any property, the city's OCP is a public document. We welcome questions from any property owner. The city's front of house and zoning counters are happy to respond to any inquiries we receive. And with respect to the Burkeville example that was listed, that would be a situation where it was a legal non-conforming duplex. It did burn down. Staff were working with the property owner on a rezoning application for that property in order to allow them to rebuild the duplex. At the end of the day, that property owner elected to withdraw that application. The primary rationale for withdrawing that application was the need to revisit city utility connections as part of a rebuild and the upgrade costs associated with those new city utility connections.
Great, I appreciate it. Thank you to the chair, to staff. That's answered all my questions. Thank you very much.
Councillor Al?
Yes, I have a question to staff. I find this report quite odd in the sense that you have the details, information, and also you have options being presented, and also you have a preferred option recommended. So why is this only for information?
Through the chair to Councillor Al, the nature of the referral asked for staff to investigate what approach would be required. It did not direct us to pursue any specific approach, which is why we have presented this report for information purposes.
Okay.
If I can add to that, I think also when staff look at the priorities, the limited resources and the priorities, we don't consider this high priority for either staff time or allocation of resources that would be required. So the reflects that committee or council may want to take action, but at a staff level, we don't believe that it's a high priority for action.
All right, I don't see any further hands up, so there is a recommendation in our package.
We receive it for information.
It has been moved and seconded. I don't see any further hands up, so I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is carried, thank you. I don't believe there are any managers' reports today, so looking for adjournment.
So move.
Moved and seconded, we are adjourned.